Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day. This is Chris Miller with the Spiritual Artist Podcast, and I'm really excited about today's guest. I had gone on vacation several weeks ago, and I got a wonderful email from this woman. She had read my book, and she took the time to go to my website, fill out the form, which is very impressive. She went to spiritualartisttoday.com, and she filled out the form and said how much she loved my book. And I will tell you, listeners, that I love making art, but when I feel like I reach someone on a consciousness level, wow, it really does humble me and move me, and really I appreciate it so much. So I'm so thrilled with getting that email from Crystal. So let me introduce Crystal. Gaye is an artisan specializing in French couture embroidery. She's going to laugh at me for pronouncing that poorly. She is an art therapist and creativity coach. She is passionate about inspiring creativity in others and sharing her skills and knowledge with students around the world. It's good evening for me, but it's good morning for you, Crystal.
Good morning for me. Hello.
Hey.
Hello. I'm so pleased to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Now, I know you're in Australia, which is very also was very impressive for me. I was so thrilled. I don't know how you got a copy of my book, but it made me feel good. Where are you at in Australia?
So I'm in Adelaide, Australia. We're in the middle of winter, so it's cold, but the sun has come out for us today. So that's kind of nice too.
That's so hard for me to understand, because
because you're sweltering.
We are sweltering. It's 106 today in Dallas, and it's been over 100 every day. So hearing that you're in winter, wow. Maybe that's why the light in your image is so good. You got that morning light coming in, right?
It is. I've got a beautiful office with a big window and the sun's just coming through, and I've got the heater on, so we're all good and toasty here.
Oh, well, that's nice. I love to share that. So there's so many things we want to talk about, and Crystal has pointed out some things in the book. But first, I love the idea that you are an art therapist. And I thought you'd share that. What does that mean? I mean, how does that work?
Okay, so many years ago, I went back to university and studied to become an art therapist. It was a Jungian-based course, so we did a lot of transpersonal work, which means working with dreams, working with the unconscious. And it was just this amazing journey for me because it started to combine the two things that I loved in life, which was spirituality, personal growth, and creativity. And so art therapy brings those two together because I just hold this deep belief that art heals. It doesn't matter what you produce at the end. If you get something that's beautiful, that you're happy with, lovely. But it's actually that process that we go through. And art therapy is all based on privileging the unconscious or getting in touch with the unconscious. And we'll do that through paint, through scribble, through mark making, drawings, clay, any modality of creativity. You can use it to access, our inner guidance, the inner knowing that's inside of all of us.
Oh, wow. That's actually even better than I thought it would be.
What were you expecting?
Well, I don't know. I thought, you'd color until you felt better. But actually, I love the idea of accessing your subconscious.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is innate wisdom. Our bodies know, our unconscious knows. And the art is just a medium. It's a language to, let the unconscious speak to us, let our inner guidance come up. And sometimes we're completely unaware of it. Sometimes we have an inkling, we know, but we don't actually want to know what we really know. So there's a little bit of fear around it. And sometimes people are completely blown away with what comes up. It's like, oh, I had no idea that was there. And then everything makes sense and it relieves the issue and healing and integration can begin.
So listeners, so should we explain that? You have your conscious mind, which is what deals with day-to-day activities and maybe your belief systems, what you're taught and all that. And then you have your subconscious, which is also built in by your, belief systems, but on a deeper level. Would that be right?
Yep, absolutely.
And go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
For me, and then the unconscious is where all the trauma is stored. So something happens to you when you're a little girl, a dog barks, you get scared, you get told off. Teacher at school says you can't paint, you can't draw. You put that in there, right? And it's there whether you know it or not. Then something happens on the outside that you think is completely unrelated, and that wound gets triggered. So there's that part of it that can be dealt with, healed. The other part of it is, we can't use the God word, can we, because of the book?
Yeah.
But
no, you
let's
can.
call
You
it.
can use, definitely, you can use the word God. Yes.
I'll use higher self, because I believe inside all of us we have this higher guidance. I call it my inner guidance system, and we can access that through art, through mark making, through these creative processes. It's there in every painting that you do. It's there in every embroidery I do. But you can use art therapy as a process to really go direct and get those answers for any issue that you have in life.
So I have to ask, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Do you have a favorite activity that helps you with that, uncover that, or to demonstrate the subconscious with the students?
I don't, because what I find is different issues, different mediums are great for different issues. All right. So if somebody is angry, I might give them a great big jumbo crayon, a box of them, and say, pick the color that's right for you. And then they'll just scribble all over the paper. But if somebody is sobbing in grief, then we'll use a different medium that's appropriate for that. So there's not a favorite. I just assess in the moment, ask my inner guidance what I think that person would benefit from. And often I'll have on the table all of the materials, and they get to pick, because their inner guidance will tell them which is the best medium for them to use on that particular day.
Wow. And do you focus on a particular age range, or have you done this with?
I work with adults. It does work really well with children as well. So yeah, everybody has their inner guidance. Everybody has their unconscious stuff in there. So it works with everybody.
It's funny, in the last podcast I interviewed Wileen, and I noticed when I listened to it again that she refers to, like, she would do a check. She would check with her higher self.
Yeah.
And it was so strewn in there, I didn't even notice it in the interview, but we all do that. And I try to encourage, that's what I'm trying to do with the book is I want people to practice that conversation, act, listen, and react to that higher self. So it's sort of like a dance, right?
Absolutely. And I think that we all get so busy in our minds, and they're busying around and making all that noise, that we forget. And I'm forever telling my embroidery students, just take a breath. Just take a breath, listen, ask the piece, what's the next step? Ask your painting, ask the drawing, ask the sculpture, ask your recipe, what's next? Just let it talk to you. We don't have to think everything. There are other resources that we all have that can guide us.
Oh, I love that. Eckhart Tolle talks about suspending the mind, or like going beyond the mind to that quiet space, like you're talking about, where you're almost not thinking through the creativity. You're just being through the creativity.
Absolutely. And I know that you talk with groups as well. And I just find when I stand in front of a group of people, something comes through me. So yes, I do my preparation, but I don't write out a speech. I don't do any of that. I just am fully in the moment, and I feel this presence come through me and speak and give the right information to the right person in the way that they can understand. And there's a little part of me in the back that goes, that was good. I didn't know I knew that. Where did that come from? It's like, wow. And that magic always happens for me in a group setting. I love it. Something higher than me speaks through me.
Oh, I love that I can relate. And that's a tip I would share with the listeners, is before you begin a project, to just sit down and say, what is, just get quiet a little bit. I'm not talking about an hour-long meditation. I'm just talking about, sit for a moment and maybe ask spirit or your guidance, what is the best possible thing for me to do now?
Yeah, Absolutely. I ask, what would you like to express through me today? What wants to come through me today? Because my mind is so busy, it will have a to-do list of 50 things. Oh, let's do this, let's do this. And it's like, okay, let's just take a breath, take a step back and ask, what is it? And then I trust, there's the surrender thing. Then I trust that whatever comes up, if it feels like a 10, it's like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. If it feels like a 7 or an 8, it's like, maybe that's not my highest expression today. So I just wait.
Do you do that? Do you do like a number? I've had people do that where you go from.
Yeah, I do, because I think it's very easy for our mind to kick in and justify. Oh yes, that would be a sensible thing to put your energy into today. You know, that will give you safety and security, rather than the highest thing for me might be to go and sit in the sun for an hour and just connect and recalibrate. And then the inspiration comes that shows me the idea that really takes me where I need to go, rather than my busy little mind saying, now, if you do this and you do that, then we can guarantee this outcome, but it might only be a 5 or a 6. Does that make sense?
Oh, very much, very much. Let me ask you, when you do that, do you call that, I went to a coach for many years that did what's called muscle testing. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yeah. Personally, I've done a lot of it. I don't use it as a therapist, but the body holds so much wisdom. And I've forgotten the author's name, but I read a fabulous book many years ago called The Body Never Lies. And it's all in there. The body knows. The body has its innate wisdom.
You know, I think that's kind of an area that I see myself exploring more, is the body. I've talked about a little bit on previous podcasts, but you know, we always talk about we kind of ignore, especially over here in the West, we ignore, you know, the body. We talk about the mind. It's all about mind. We're going to force it. We're going to force things to happen.
Yeah.
It's body, mind, and spirit. You know, all 3 are part of you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, it was reorganizing that. So in the West, we have mind first. Think about it, work out a solution. As I had to recalibrate myself and learn that higher self is first, spirit, universe, God, whatever you want to put it, that's here, that's ruling everything. Then it's mind, then it's body, you know, it's all there. And then heart, you have to bring heart into it as well, I think is, super important.
See, I knew I liked you, Crystal.
We could talk for hours, I'm sure.
We could, because that's exactly how I feel. You know, I get up in the morning and I do a little, what I call a spiritual practice. And so I think I encourage listeners to don't look at your phone, but just sit quietly, maybe read something inspiring, or just sit there and look outside, look at, you know, I talk about in the book, look at the birds, but it's exactly what you just said, is my conscious connection to the higher power is my number one priority.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is, and I believe that's, and I coach my clients on the same thing. That's always your first priority. If we try to get past that, if we try to control it from the human perspective, you know, like what we think is the best possible solution, we're oftentimes cutting off the best possible solution.
Absolutely. But I think it's a tricky thing to recalibrate ourselves to do that, because sometimes the guidance will be sit still and do nothing, or go to this obscure place and do this. And it's like, but that's not going to fix my problem, or that's not going to make me money, or that's not going to sort this issue out. And then you go to that place and you do whatever the guidance is, and you meet somebody and the solution just comes up in a conversation, or you see something that leads you to what, you know, it works in a magical way. And I've experienced it so many times, but still to this day, my active little mind will come in and say, no, that's just not sensible. That's not logical. That's not responsible. Just don't be doing that. It's like, just be quiet. Just be quiet. I am committed to surrender, to follow my guidance, and I'm going to do it.
Well, I love that. So listeners, when I first talked to Crystal, I talk to people before I schedule a podcast, and I asked her, was there a particular topic in the book that she wanted to talk about? And I was thrilled, Crystal, because a lot of people don't go to that, but there's a chapter on surrender. And I'm loving to talk about surrender, because I think there's different levels of surrender, right?
Absolutely. And let me say to anyone listening, if you haven't read this book, please read it. It changed my life, which is why I took the time to email Chris. And I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for writing such a beautiful book that helped articulate the things that I was feeling inside. But I'm not a writer by any chance. And it integrated it in me as I was reading the words, and I read it slowly. And then when you said pick a chapter, it's like, no, I need to talk about the whole book. It's so fabulous. But after I sat down quietly and went within, it was like, no, surrender is still what I would call my growing edge. You know, I'm learning, but I'm not 100% living it fully. So that was why, yeah, it was the chapter that I thought would be the richest for us to talk about.
Well, it's funny. I told this to people that are close to me. I wrote this book over a period of years, right? The ideas came to me while I painted, and over COVID, I put it all into a book. And for me, the goal was to give myself a journal for myself as well as others, because we all forget, we all learn these lessons and then we forget them. And so when you said surrender, I went back and I thought, well, what did I say in that chapter? I just wanted to remind myself. And there's different levels of surrender, which I think when I wrote that chapter, it was very hard to get my hands around, and surrender is it's not giving up, right? That's one of the key points there. It's not just saying, oh, I give up, but it's leaning in. I like that word, leaning into. So there was one little part in the surrender I talked about, you when you practice it, you can't fake it. And I just wanted to share something because it really did move me. Even after all this time, when you pointed this out, I had written an example. It was on page 133. And I said, here's a perfect example of surrendering to what is. And I said, as I try to complete this chapter, one of my Boston Terriers, Bandit, has jumped up on my lap and placed himself between me and my computer. How do I respond to this? And, I questioned in the book, do I yell at him? Do I push him down? Right. And what's funny? And I wrote, what is Spirit telling me? Perhaps to slow down my feverish typing and ponder my thoughts a bit longer before recording them. We practice surrender when we listen for whatever word you want to call it, guiding us. But what was particularly moving about this, Crystal, is I lost Bandit.
I'm so sorry.
He did. He passed away last fall. He got cancer, and he died younger than he should have, and it was very hard on me. And do you know what? When I went back and read that, I thought that's why he jumped on my lap. Because he's in this book. I wrote him into the book, and now every time I read this book, I will remember him. And
you're going to make me cry. I don't want to cry.
I know. It did. It got me very emotional. I was like, oh my gosh, that was, and at the time, and I think that's the point of surrender, right? At the time, I had no idea what Spirit was guiding me and why. I was, my little mind, I call it the little Chris, was saying, get out of my way, I'm writing, and I didn't, I just stopped. And I enjoyed, and I'll remember that moment now. So I will hold it so close to me.
Oh, that's just so beautiful. And when I read that, I'm a cat person. And so having a fur person in our lives, I think, is just such a blessing. And when I read that, it was like, follow the guidance, just be in the moment with him. And, just the act of those two beautiful energies coming together. I don't think we give our fur people enough credit for the magic that they bring. We all know that they have love and companionship, and they make us laugh, and they're warm and comforting, but I think they also work at a higher level with us that we don't truly understand. I really do. So yes, beautiful story and just perfect. I think more and more, and COVID for me was all about being still. Slow down from the busyness of our ridiculously over busy life, go within, think about things, I think it was a forced way for us to go from here on this level to here, you know, to just being able to slow our minds and our bodies and our lives down and surrender into listening and being able to hear. I think that's the key to surrender, is we are so busy doing that we can't actually hear. We're so busy thinking, what should I do? What do I need to do? We can't hear that inner guidance. So, and you obviously weren't listening that day, so you had to have a physical fur reminder of oh yeah, okay, just need to stop for a moment.
Yeah, and I didn't even at the time I went with it, but I didn't know why. And a year and a half later, I read it and I'm like, oh, and I just remembered how much I love that dog. And you're right, pets, they remind us to be present. They definitely remind us to be present, you know, because they're truly in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think they embody unconditional love. You know, they teach us that every day.
Oh, definitely. So when you read that about surrender in the chapter, let's talk about that. Let's untangle that, unpack that a little bit. You talked about COVID and how it forced you to slow down, and hear more and hear better. Is that something you do when you create your art, when you do embroidery? Because people can see in the background some of your work. It's gorgeous, and I love creativity. It comes in so many ways, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have so many. Oh, hold on, I'll get back to your question. But so many people that say to me, "Oh, I'm not an artist," and I'm there. Yes, you are. Whether you're making food, whether you make a beautiful garden, whether you're a writer, a painter, an embroidery artisan, a textile artisan, doesn't matter what your chosen modality is. It's the creativity that comes through you. And it's just such an integral and important part of my life. I just can't imagine life without it.
You know, I totally agree with that. I was looking on YouTube the other day, because I always go to YouTube to look for videos, and I stumbled upon a video where some guy was saying he was the opposite. And he was saying, everybody says everybody's an artist, but they're not. And I disagree. I think, but when I say artist, I say creator, creative. We are all, that's by our very nature. That's what we are. We are creators. And now you might be less aware of your creative skills. You might be less aware of your artistic skills, but that they're there. And so if you're listening to this and you are saying that to yourself, well, I'm not, then you just need to sit down, call me, and you need to sit down and have someone point out how you are. You know, I've had people come up to me and say, in fact, I was just at an art show this past weekend, and a woman came up to me and she said that I'm not an artist. And I looked at the way she was dressed and I said, look at how immaculate. She was dressed so perfectly coordinated and matched. The colors were beautiful and subtle, and they went together. I said, it's there. It's right there.
Yeah. Again, I think that's conditioning. We're taught not to think that an artist is this or this or this. Very rigid understanding of that. And it's just something that I talk to my students about all the time. And I actually use the French words broderie d'art on my emails, which is art embroidery, because what I do is art. It's not a painting on a wall, although I use paint in some of my textile work, but anything that gets you into that creative flow where you're expressing that soul, that heart that's within you, whether it's a bowl of pasta that you make for your family, or a beautiful couture gown, or a beautiful abstract painting. It doesn't matter what the modality is. It's the essence in you that comes through it. It is there in all of us, but I think there is so many women in particular, because I work mainly with women, is they're just reluctant to own it. And so that's a big part of what I try and demonstrate and then inspire, you know, for people to really claim their authentic, you know, self, and to shine that out into the world, because the world would transform if we were all doing that really congruently and just being ourselves and shining that light out into the world in whatever way your unique expression is. The world would change.
I agree. what I like to tell people is it's consciousness. It's, are you consciously connected to what you're doing?
Yeah.
And it can be literally landscaping. It can be acting, singing, but it also can be making a meal. Now, that's the difference though. So that if you're listening to this and you just go into the kitchen and you don't pay attention to what you're doing and you throw some stuff in the pot and you do, that's a very, very, very rough layer. You are still creating, right? You're still creating.
Yeah.
But you're not creating consciously. And the more consciously you create, the better and exciting and more of you is in it.
Absolutely. It's like Nonna's chicken soup. You know, if you've got an Italian grandma and Nonna makes you like chicken soup when you're sick, there's nothing like it because she's put love into it, and it's the intent that she weaves into it. So every garment I make, I weave as I'm stitching, and it takes me hundreds and hundreds of hours. So it's a very meditative practice for me. It's a slow practice. It's precise. And that's why I'm drawn to it, because I am weaving the intent of love or peace or whatever it is for that particular person that the garment is for.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, I was thinking the same thing as you, right as you were speaking, which we must be connected as far away as we are. And I was thinking about embroidery and I just, like I said, I just came back from an art show, and I tell people there's two kinds of what I call expression. There's flow, and that's when you're just really going really fast and loose and it's just flowing through you. But then there's this, like you're talking, and I do it on some of my paintings, not this one behind me, but it's just meditative. And I'll sit there and I'll do edge work and I get lost in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm very focused on the edge of the brush and the edge of the paint and how it's drawing out and just doing it and doing it. And I'm sure the same way you must be, you know, with.
Exactly. But there you have just described what I call, what am I going to call that? Like, that's flow in action, because your mind is so focused on the detail, right, of creating or executing the detail, that it allows space for that busyness just to slow down enough for the inner voice to come up. So I will be sitting there stitching away, time disappears, I feel peaceful, I feel happy, I feel joyful, and then that's often when the good ideas will come up. Kind of like in the shower. People say, oh, it came to me in the shower. But when it's just calming that the busy mind long enough so that the higher self can come through, or the internal guidance can come through and speak to us.
Oh, okay. So let's coin that. I think you said flow in space. What did you flow in? I
don't know what I said because it came really through me, Chris.
Flow in space. I mean, it is. You're right. It's when I talk about act, listen, and react. Once you get that down, but for me, I think in the book, obviously, for me, I was stepping back and really slowing down and watching myself. But you're right. When you see an artist moving fast and quickly, you could call that the same. It is. I think you said flow in space.
Yeah, flow state, and I think it's just different expressions of it, because sometimes before I'll start a new piece, I like to flick paint around on a big piece of paper in my backyard. So I put on music, because that turns my brain off and the inner perfectionist off. And I will just get cheap paints in colors that I love, and I will just let my inner child go wild and flip it all over the paint. And then in that process, something is accessed within me. It brings it up. And then I will sit quietly and wait for my guidance and start that slower detail. So it works either way. It's just, accessing the unconscious.
Okay, so let me repeat that back and see if I got that right. So you go into that faster flow to help you kind of land, maybe.
Sometimes. So if my brain is on overload, which it often is, I have found that is one of the most perfect ways to get into my body and to quiet my nervous system enough to get still. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it works incredibly well for me. But I can't just go out and do it. I have to use music, because I put my iPod in. I let the music come through me. That moves my body. The paint comes out. The color, because color is super important to me. It's the driving motivation behind my whole creative practice. I must work with colors on any particular day that lights me up, that speaks to my soul. And if I've done a class or a workshop and they're asking me to work in colors that don't resonate with me, I can't do it. So the color works its magic, the movement, the music, the whole thing. And then that leaves me in a place where I can center and relax and be in that beautiful, blissful energy for something new to come through.
That's lovely. I would explain that place. I agree with what you're saying about colors. And for me, that's why sometimes a larger painting, a big painting, can be more challenging because it has to be done over several days. And if your mood is changing, right?
Yeah.
And or whatever, your state is changing, and you put certain colors in, sometimes you have to keep it there. You want to, and it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, it's a moving target, right?
Yeah. Have you ever done a progressive painting over like 30 days?
Oh yeah.
So I will do, especially if I've got an issue. So this is an art therapy thing. So we'll start a canvas. This is not a painting for sale to put on your wall. This is a painting, a progressive painting that you do as an internal system. So I will paint something on it one day, and then the next day I paint something again, and the next day I ask what it wants again. And over that 30 days, I will go through a whole transformative process, and generally I will get the solution to whatever my issue was.
Wow. So that's a great exercise.
It is. It's fun because there's no pressure, because you're not asking for the answer on day one. You're making a mark or using a color or a symbol, and you get it out, and it's like, okay, that's out. And then you go back the next day and it does look different, or you feel different. Or then the next day, sometimes I'll stare at it and I don't know what to do. And then finally something comes through. Or then the day after, I'll go back and it's like, oh, look at that, blah, blah, blah. I couldn't see that yesterday. Oh, okay, that now, because you start to see the symbols and they come through, and it's like, why did I paint an upside down sun? Oh, okay. And then 3 days later, I understand why I did it, because the next thing informs that thing. And you can watch your state change over a 30-day period. It's super fascinating.
That's really interesting. We talk about journaling, and that's the way for me. I could watch how my mood changed in words, but what you're describing is to how your mood changes in art, in visual.
Yeah. And it's not, I want to be really clear, it's not art for appreciation. It's art as an internal journaling. Think of it as journaling art. You make a mark, you use a color, even different mediums. So I might use acrylic paint, I might use a pastel, I might use colored pencils, I might use markers. So everything, there's no rules. You can just put on and work in whatever medium, whatever color, make whatever marks you feel that you need to that day.
Now, have you ever tried taking that over to your embroidery, or is that possible? Is it possible to do that?
No, I don't. Now you've really challenged me. Beautiful. Wait for the workshop. Okay. No, I don't, because my embroidery is my living. Isn't that so interesting? You've just shown me. Thank you. Beautiful mirror. There's the disconnect. No, I've never tried it in embroidery, because I think there's so much time that goes into my embroidery. It has to have a purpose to it. I do experiment with new techniques, but not in that same way. So thank you. I'll be doing that next.
Well, it's always that. I think listeners, you should be aware of why you make art. You should always be aware of it. And I don't think, I see a lot of people, especially in America, falling into this trap of, I do it to make money. And that's right. As a spiritual artist, I'm like, there's plenty of art out there and there's plenty of money out there. You can get money in so many different ways. And so for me, I love to approach the canvas, and just for me, and gosh, I just recommended this to someone, but to spend as much time as I can in that flow state that you're talking about, that for me, the challenge was, how long can I extend that period of play? And I'm I'm a OCD person. I'm controlling. So sometimes when I first started, maybe 3 minutes, like literally I could do 3 minutes, and then it was suddenly the critical mind was coming in, and I'd walk away, and then I'd come back and I'd stretch it out a little bit longer. And then, so I think we, don't fall into the trap. And that doesn't mean you're not successful. Yeah, I think I was talking to someone on the show floor at the show. It was in Santa Fe. And she said, oh, my paintings didn't sell. And I said, so what? Right? Did you love making them? Did you love who you were when you made them?
Right? Beautiful. Yeah.
That's the reward. It really is the journey, not the destination. And
correct. But I do think that in our culture, there is, you're not successful until somebody pays for your art, because with everything that we do, most of us are looking for outside validation. As soon as somebody looks at your drawing or your painting and says, oh, that's good, we start to accept ourselves as an artist. The first time someone internationally saw my work and said, wow, your work's at a really high standard. That's fabulous. That's really, really good. But I think where we get to the actual gold is exactly where you said, it's the process. I will often make samples. I'll just play. And let's talk about the word play, because I think that's integral in a creative process, because everyone takes it seriously. They want to paint by numbers. They want to go from here to here. They want to deserve a certain outcome, and then they want to know that someone's going to validate that and pay the money for it. Like, that's not the point of creativity. Got lost completely in there.
Exactly. And I think, when you're as a teacher, I'm sure you find that all the time, right? Your students want to be told step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah. And 20 years ago, that's how I taught. I was very directive. It's like, here's the theory, these are the steps, here's the order of work. If you want this desired outcome, this is what we're going to do. And thank goodness, when I went through my art therapy training, I grew a lot and learned a lot about many different things. And so now I'll just encourage the person to take a breath, first of all, and say, well, what do you think? Let me hold it back. Let me show it to you from across the other side of the room. Hold it in a mirror, look at it. Ask the piece, ask your painting, ask your embroidery, ask your cooking. What's the next step? What needs to come next? And literally let the piece talk to you and tell you where to go next. And play. I think we should talk about play, because being such a serious perfectionist, I'm only recently learning how to play, which is what the splashing the paint around in the backyard is all about for me, because I was always colouring within the lines very neatly, following the rules, doing everything precisely, being a good girl. And now it's like, no, there has to be an element of play and experimentation and openness in everything that I do.
Wow. When I painted early, you're right. I would, in the image behind me, I would do straight edges. And then I found that when the edge was sloppy, what I thought was sloppy, there's a word of judgment. It was actually more interesting. I was like, oh my gosh, look at that deckled edge. Yeah. It's not perfectly smooth. It shows the hand. It shows the weight of the hand. Oh, wow. And juggling, for me, that is my challenge now. Sharp with soft, sharp edges with rough edges, letting it be loose and tight. How do you do that, right?
Well, that's about integration, isn't it? It's about calling in all aspects of yourself and learning how to hold them all at once and letting them all have a voice in the one painting. That's an exciting journey. Challenging, but exciting.
It is challenging, and because you have to give them all equal share and equal time and turn off that judgment. So I want to go back to that word surrender, because there's a second part to surrender that I realized in this journey that I thought was really important. And you talk about it because you yourself, you just said earlier that you stop and you listen to your higher self. So I just want to share that with the listeners. Surrender for me is also about, like you said, turning off the little I but surrendering to knowing. Surrendering is partly, there's a faith aspect in surrender. You have faith that deep inside of you is an original creative. Yeah, I always say your creative DNA is an original expression of spirit, God, whatever force, and what you do. And so I like to teach people, if you let that loose, truly let it loose, your art will be unlike anyone else's. It will be totally original. And the test is to not look at other work, to not try to follow patterns, but the more you look within and let free, and literally surrender, let free, let go, flow, to render unto, to render away to something else, that comes from surrender, the word render to a higher power. It's exciting, right?
Absolutely. But I think it takes great courage to surrender. I do. Because we're not taught that. Imagine if we'd been taught to do that as children and how to create. The world would be amazing. It really would, because, I think we all have that. We must do it the right way. We're not good enough. And all of that just blocks creativity to such a big energy. And if we can just let the essence of who we really are come through, that's when the magic comes. So when I work with my students, I call it finding your own visual language. How is it? You can see my work on Instagram and you'll know it at 50 paces because it's got an essence about it that's my unique expression. People say to me, oh, I knew that was your work before I even read it. And you can see that with many artists. They might be doing different things, but their essence is always there. And that's why there's room in the world for everybody, because you're a unique person. There's nobody like Chris. There's nobody like Crystal. It's just me doing my thing, using my colors, using my iridescence, crystals, whatever shines. I like it. Other people like neons or bolds or sharp lines or deep colors. And that's what makes the magic in the world. How boring would it be if we're all painting the Mona Lisa? We need to really understand the value of our own uniqueness and who we really are and how important it is to express that out into the world. Gives permission for other people to do it. I notice with my students, when I'm fully authentic, fully vulnerable, I'll be honest about, I got stuck here, I didn't know where to go, and then I tapped into my guidance, then this came through, this is how I got there. It gives permission for other people to do the same thing. Do you find that?
Oh yeah, I'm just letting you go because it was.
You went quiet on me. It's like, what is come back?
Everything you're saying is just wonderfully put, and it is true. It does take courage, but you're safe. I believe we're safe in that expression, and it's that, like you said, that leading edge, that edge. I think you mentioned that early on.
Growing edge, I call it. Yeah, my growing edge. Yeah. It's like Mercury. It's in my hand, but it slips. It's like, oh, there it goes again. Back to it. Remember, I'm always saying to myself, remember who you truly are. Remember the magic that's in us. Remember what powerful creators we really are.
Right. We are. I say individualized expressions of spirit, God, a greater power, and knowing that, surrendering to that. And so in my book, I use a reference. I don't know if you remember me talking about the cantaloupe, and there's a chapter about how it has its own pattern of perfection, and it grew in a perfect way. And if it follows that way and it puts itself in the right environment, we have to put ourselves in the right environment, but it will grow and blossom and be truly spectacular because that blueprint is in there. And so, like you were saying, it's the same thing. But you're right. Is it Brené Brown that talks about courage, or has a book on that about vulnerability, I think?
Yeah, she's the vulnerability girl.
Yes. And it is true. You've got to be vulnerable. And, for this woman to do the show and she didn't sell any paintings, there's a vulnerability in that.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to remind her, no, look at your stuff. It's original.
Yeah, absolutely.
You,
And
yeah.
I think just to show your art, it takes great courage, because most people do feel very vulnerable about that. But it's because they're listening to what other people say about it, good, bad, or neutral. Neutral means nobody loved it either, doesn't it? So I just think if you can really embrace the beauty of the expression that comes through you and let that be enough, know that that's enough. You don't need outside validation from anybody. If it comes, that's great. But if you get hooked into that, I think that will also disrupt your art practice. If you can remain in that sense of self and that authenticity and just encourage, I like you said it's safe. I think that's really great to emphasize that it is safe to be in that place. That's where the magic happens. But I think many of us are scared to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where the magic, that's where the intuition, that's where the ideas, that's where stuff just pops into your head, and suddenly you're divinely guided,
Yeah.
and practice that. Just keep practicing that intuition. And I don't believe, that you'll ever be guided to hurt someone or do something bad.
Yeah. I think for me, at the beginning of my journey of surrender, I would sit in meditation and go, yep, okay, I'm surrendering. I really am. I'm surrendering now. But could we do it my way? Because, there was this doubt, there was this fear that my higher self was going to ask me to do something that I didn't want to do, which is completely irrational. But I think that's just religious conditioning that came back through. And it was like when I really started to understand that my higher self loves me and only wants to create the best things for me in life. So it's never going to give me guidance that's going to hurt me or hurt somebody else. It might be challenging. It might push me outside my comfort zone so that I grow or enter into a new area. But it's I like the word internal guidance system. Because for me, that's like, well, it's like your GPS. Follow it. It's going to show you where to go because it's got your best interest at heart.
Yeah. That's funny you say that internal guidance system, because I when I was in Santa Fe, my Waze didn't work right. And it was flipping. Like every time I turned, it didn't know which direction I was going in. And I thought, oh, I could write a whole podcast on this. When you trust something, and let's put this clearly, when you trust something outside of yourself to guide you, like not you, something other than you. And it kept flipping, and I couldn't get, I was just trying to get across town. And I have all these stories in Santa Fe where I with my guidance system, but you're right. You have an inner guidance system.
Yeah.
And it will, you can trust it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So quite lovely. So I love that, and we could go on with that. But we could. But is there anything else you wanted to share about what you do? I think the embroidery, your process, or anything. I know you teach classes online.
I do. So I have students all around the world. I have online classes and kits from my website. You can go to crystalgaye.com.au. And they're all there for you. And if you would like to work one-on-one personally with me, either as an embroidery tutor or art therapy or creativity coach, I would love to, assist you on your journey. If you feel drawn to me and what I've got to offer, especially if you're in Australia, that would be wonderful. But yeah, I think, again, we talked about technology a little bit last time, and I just think it's fabulous that I'm here in my little office in Australia, you're on the other side of the world in Texas, and we can communicate like this, and then people all around the world can see it. So we are a global community now, and yeah, it's exciting for me when I get up and I think, who have I got today? Oh, I've got someone in Texas, someone in London, someone in far north Queensland. It's pretty amazing, really is. So yeah,
that's a wonderful example of abundance, right? And
exactly.
and how even with COVID there was a lesson in it, right?
Yeah. Yes,
So
it forced me to use technology. I didn't want to do it. I was resistant, like no, but it was a blessing in the end. It has truly been.
before COVID, did you just teach around you locally?
I travelled internationally. So I worked for a company in London called Hand and Lock. They're the oldest couture embroidery house. So they employed me as their international embroidery teacher. So I travelled to London, I travelled to America several times a year and did, face-to-face teaching. And I loved it. It was amazing. But it's like a 24-hour flight, 3 planes to get from Adelaide to where I was teaching in America, which is exhausting. And, coming back as well. So COVID really gave me that space to learn about technology, learn about Zoom. Now I teach with students all over the world. So it just opens the world. We closed the world down, but in my view, it actually opened the world up in different ways. So there was the magic in COVID for me.
Oh, wow. That's lovely. Wonderfully put. Yeah. Well, like I said, it was so nice to hear from you and get to know you and share this with you. And listeners, in the bio, there'll be a description of how you can get more information from Crystal about her teaching. What a wonderful art form.
Thank you.
I mean, let me just, before we let you go, because I didn't really let you talk about that. How long have you been doing embroidery? When did you start?
I've been embroidering for over 20 years. Started with traditional hand embroidery. And then I found this amazing book 20 odd years ago that showed the high-end couture art of Monsieur Lesage in Paris. He set up an embroidery school an embroidery atelier, I should say. It's now turned into a school. And they did all this amazing art embroidery for the top fashion designers in Europe. And the minute I saw that book, when you just get that, oh, that's it, that's what I have to learn. And I was on the wrong side of the world and I didn't have a huge budget to go and study in Paris, which is what you need to do generally. So it took many years, but I was blessed and I was guided and I found a way to learn, and it transformed my life and my career just completely changed. So it's been an incredible journey, but I truly believe if you follow your passion and you don't listen to, I can't do that, or I was telling myself this story, I live on the wrong side of the world, there are no embroidery schools here, I can't afford to go to Paris. And look, I've done it. So anything is possible. If you follow your passion, if you really want it, if you really believe in it, you can create it.
I love it. What a great ending for this wonderful interview. Thanks again. This is great. Some great ideas in here.
Well, I just feel so blessed that not only did you write this fabulous book that, really spoke to my soul and transformed me, that, when I sent you a nice little email with no expectation, just like, thank you, I honestly just felt that I needed to, and again, technology allows me to go to your website and send you a nice little thank you. And when you responded and said, would you like to, have a chat? It's like, yes, of course. How amazing that I get to talk to another spiritual artist and look at the rich, deep conversations that we've had already. It's just been a true blessing. So thank you for being you and putting out your beautiful message into the world. So important.
Oh, thank you. This has been great. And as we talked, you could just see how much similarity, even it's interesting, right? Totally different creative discipline, but we're using the same spiritual practices. We're using the same activities. It's all one.
Yeah. Different expressions of the same one. Yeah,
exactly. So I'd love to remind my listeners that this is also on all the regular podcast channels, but it's also on YouTube. And to follow me on YouTube, I'm growing a following there. And Crystal will share this, and you can check out her YouTube page and also see some of her videos and her work, which is really exciting. Once again, a great world where you can share your expertise everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
So thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast, and we will talk to you soon. So stay tuned and follow the channel.